I think we've got most people in because it's just not moving at all right now. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started this morning. And I just want to welcome everybody this morning to our coffee chat. We were expecting around 200. We're at about 125, 130 participants. So thank you. I'm Rich Arkanov, Superintendent, and appreciate the opportunity to serve our community in this position and to be a part of a fantastic school district. With us this morning is Assistant Superintendent Jason Taylor. Jason oversees our health services and human resources. Also with us is Dr. Nora Hoover. She oversees teaching and learning for the district. And also with us is, well, I thought was Dr. Long, Bill Long. I think he's joining us audio only. He's Assistant Superintendent of Operations. And also with us, sorry, we are moving slides for some reason. There we go. Also with us is Mrs. Amy Norman. She's the head of our health services. Amy, good morning. And Miss Christy Berger is with us. She's ahead of our counseling and guidance department. So good morning, Christy. And then finally, our Executive Director of Communications, Stacy Conrad. Stacy will be moderating the questions, so please use the Q&A box this morning to put in your questions. We know many of you submitted questions ahead of time too. Stacy's already got those kind of teed up for us as well. I want to thank you again for being here this morning and listening in. As always, we will record this and we'll have it out on our website. So thank you. If you are, Stacy kind of shared with me this morning that if you go and look for our coffee chats on YouTube, you may struggle finding them because we mentioned COVID, and YouTube is trying to control just information on COVID. So they may not pop up. I think they're still on YouTube. They just don't pop up as a search. Is that right, Stacy?
Yes, they're not listed in the playlist. You'll see the ones from February of 2020, but as soon as the coffee chats mentioned COVID, they're not listed. So, but if you do go to our website /coffee chat, you'll be able to see a direct link to all of them, and you can access them from there.
Yes. Thank you. So is everybody seeing the screen okay? My computer's acted kind of crazy on me, but we're going to start by talking a little bit, obviously, about COVID and where we are as a school district and what's happening over the next few days and what has happened. So with that, I think I'm going to turn this first few slides over to you, Jason.
Sure, I'll take this one for sure. I love sharing this one because I'm really proud of what our community's done. And this has allowed us to really have some flexibility in our back to school plan. These are the 3 zip codes that represent White River Township and Center Grove schools. They do stretch over into Greenwood some and down into Franklin Communities District, but for the most part, these are our citizens. And these numbers have risen a lot since we started looking at them in June. To 4 or 5% at this point is a pretty big increase, and that's really what they've grown. And our folks down in Bargersville are almost at that 75% range. So really excited about this. We do have some limited access to student age data, but unfortunately that's only at the county level. So we have to go off the county statistic on total student vaccinations. And what we know from our adults is that White River Township is really leading Johnson County. And so it's something that we feel like our students are probably also in that boat, and we continue to have great vaccination participation. That's it on that slide, Rich.
Okay. Should have moved on to the protocols.
Yeah, some of the protocols that we have in place, these are out of our back to school plan that the board approved in July. At this time, face coverings still remain optional for students and staff under most circumstances. We do have that required federal mandate, and I know the bus drivers did a great job of informing parents that that's something that we would expect. Again, we're not turning away any students at the bus stop. We do want to transport and educate them properly and keep them safe. And we will offer masks. They're available on the buses to any student who has forgotten one that We're still at the social distancing at 3 feet in the classrooms. This is guidance we've received from Johnson County, that 3 foot would be an appropriate measurement for masked or not masked individuals. And so we continue to do that. When we can get to 6 feet, we do try to space that out, especially in those classrooms where maybe choir or band, where they're larger rooms, but the students are exhaling more. And so we do spread those out more. We are happy that we're still allowing volunteers and visitors into the buildings, and we're allowing after school facility rentals. We are asking folks to wear their mask in that situation to protect our students. But we have offered some mask exemption options as we've been allowed to those individuals. And so there are some options that if folks are able to, they can take advantage of. Our custodial staff has not stopped their excellent job of cleaning all of our high touched areas and cleaning everything that we need to, turning lunch tables over every day. Our building administration and sports staff have been doing a great job of helping get those lunchrooms turned around, getting them cleaned in between every student. It's really something, a point of pride for our corporation. We are back with our extracurricular activities. We handle that contact tracing differently. We work with the coaches and the students to see what the type of participation was in the activity during those days where contact might have taken place. A little harder to do just a flat radius there. And then on our contact tracing and quarantines, we are falling underneath the governor's executive order, and that really did stipulate how we could, or how we have to quarantine students and how we could return them. And those are some changes that came down a couple weeks ago for us, and it ultimately forced us to change some of our plans as well. Anything to add there, Ms. Norman, that I left off of this slide that you'd like to share, or Ms. Conrad?
I don't think so. I think just in regards to contact tracing, you know, we are doing the 3 feet, which that actually has been in place since the start of second semester last year. And so what we are seeing is, you know, comparable numbers to what we had last year when we were continuing to do contact tracing at that distance. Our teachers and staff are doing a great job in trying to pod students, particularly in our elementary level, so that if there is a positive student, the people that they sit by in class would be quarantined. It's the same people that they're sitting by in lunch, same people that they're sitting by in specials. So, you know, in an effort, you know, they're having a little more concentrated time around the same particular students, which does help us dramatically reduce some of these numbers so that we're not having to take out, you know, large numbers of students for quarantine. And I feel that it kind of helps us pinpoint the people who are most at risk after an exposure.
Thank you.
Talk a little bit about returning from quarantine.
Yeah, so we do have 3 options to return, and Ms. Norman and her team have been doing such a great job of informing parents about this, and then, you know, managing the return here. So some schools have chosen not to take that burden on and honestly just let their students come back on that 15th day. We really felt it was important to get our students back as soon as possible. That did add a layer of tracking and some expectations on the student and our staff to make that happen. Our team really rose to the occasion. They've been doing a great job. Our principals came together, reorganized cafeterias a little bit to make this possible. But we are happy and proud that we were able to offer that day 8 return so that, you know, if the student's notified a day or 2 after contact and they're not showing symptoms, they actually have an opportunity to come back on that 8th day with a test. They'll have to take some enhanced precautions at that point, but if they can produce that exact negative test that we need, and Ms. Norman's team can help with that, we can get them back in school and hopefully really minimize that length of quarantine. For some students, this could be a day or 2 that they're actually out because their contact could have been, you know, in a prior week, and we didn't get notified of the positive test until a little closer to that 8th day. So as long as they're still asymptomatic, we're able to return them and get them back in the classroom. So we have that day 8 return with the test. Day 11 is, again, no symptoms, but there is no testing requirement at that point. Still would follow those enhanced precautions for a few days. And then finally, day 15 is no precautions, no test, still no symptoms, folks can return. This next box did have to change a little bit on us. We had 3 options for individuals to avoid quarantine outright. That's been reduced to 2 at this point. We have proof of being fully vaccinated or proof of an independent test within the past 6 months. That's an independent positive test. So no at-home test. It need to be done by a healthcare official, someone independent. But we would accept that. That is something our county has given us, that 6-month limit. At the state level, I think that's still 90 days. Does that sound right, Ms. Norman?
That is true. Yeah, that is true. It is still, yeah, it's still 90 days, but the county has listed it as being 6 months. And when we talk about the independent provider, you know, that is just meaning it's not a test that's done at home. It needs to be done like at a CVS or a Walgreens or the county health department, someplace that is going to be verifying those tests and submitting them to the state database. So I think the other thing I just kind of want to point out is I know there's been some question about, you know, when exposure occurred and when families may have been notified about quarantine. And I would just like to assure families that we are contact tracing as soon as we find out about the positive tests. This is something that if we find, you know, this morning we found out about a few tests. The buildings are currently contact tracing those, and we will be making notifications later today in regards to what we, you know, what we investigate and find out. Some of these new layers have just created, it's made for a little bit more difficulty just in, you know, we want to check for vaccination status, you know, we're wanting to check those distances. It does take us a little bit of time, but if we're finding out about it today, we're notifying today. The other part of it is that, you know, we don't quarantine unless we have a positive test. I know that in some cases, people may wait a few days, you know, if they are not feeling well on Tuesday, you know, they may wait until Thursday and determine that, you know what, I'm still not feeling well, I'm going to go get tested. They may not find out the results of that test until Saturday, and then they may not notify me until Monday. So there is that component of that does kind of create a little bit of a delay. So you know, as soon as we find out those test results, though, we start the process of contact tracing, and then we start sending out those notifications once we've determined who those people are. Also, even if you fall into one of the categories where you're a close contact and you don't have to quarantine, you're receiving notification that you were a close contact so that you can still be, you know, monitoring your students' symptoms throughout that period. They're still able at this time to come to school. That guidance from the county has not changed. However, we do want you to still be aware of that close contact so that you can be monitoring them for symptoms, even if they've been vaccinated, even if they've got a positive COVID test within the past 6 months.
And I know we, you know, in the past we had the antibody test listed on here. I'm not going to cover that on this slide. We do have a whole slide. We're going to spend some time kind of letting the community know what's changed there. So we'll move on to the next slide.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
We started down this school year's path thinking our school board and the local administration were going to have a lot of local control over these decisions. And that was what we'd heard from the governor and the state leadership. We have since learned that's really changed, and our focus of local control is very narrow at this point. To the extent possible, our school board and our local administration are doing what we can for what our community's expectations are and the feedback we receive from our community. But some things have come down. This is one example in red that we have to identify close contacts and we must quarantine them. And there are specific rules on when and how long they have to quarantine and when and how long we could wait to return them. And that's what we've tried to do, is take the lower end of all of those recommendations. That's why we have the 8, 11, and 15-day return, because that is included in the recommendation. The governor included all of this information in his latest executive order. There's a link to a document from the Department of Health that specifically says what we have to do. These aren't necessarily recommendations. And so we look to that document for the guidance of what we need to do based off the state's guidance. Now, our county has looked at that guidance and they've offered some additional guidance in areas, much like we mentioned a minute ago. The state might say a positive test from 90 days, but the county has felt 6 months is appropriate and safe. And so we've adopted that county level guidance because we feel like that fits more of our community's expectations. That's really been the big change. I'm sure Dr. Arkanow's gonna repeat that here in a little bit, and didn't mean to steal any of his thunder, but just wanted to kind of lay that out. That's why we're where the situation we're in, and that's the guidance we've received, and we have to follow that because they have tied that to that executive order. Again, here's a great example right below the red box. Johnson County has defined a close contact as an individual within 3 feet, regardless of mask wearing. I know we saw a lot of news of a lot of schools switching to wearing masks so that they could get back to this level of contact tracing at 3 feet. We feel like our local guidance has actually allowed us to maintain that level, and we'll continue leveraging that and using that recommendation from the county. Again, quarantine length's 10 days. That's been pretty common. That hasn't changed a lot. And then it talks a little bit about how we handled extracurriculars. I think I covered that earlier.
Oh, sorry. Yep. Okay. Well, we'll go next slide. Thank you, Jason. Yeah.
So this
Yeah.
is,
So
yeah. Do you want to talk about this, Dr. Arkanoff, or?
No, go ahead. I'll let you go. I'll fill in the.
So this has been a big topic. We've received a lot of your email. We do read those. Dr. Arkanoff passes those along. We do review and read those, and we understand this is a point of frustration for a big portion of our community. You know, antibody testing is something that we were interested in as early as last spring, and seeing if we could use that to help students avoid quarantine or return early from that. The state has never allowed antibody testing to be used to avoid quarantining. They've never provided that guidance to us or allowed that as a recommendation. It was something we asked for in the spring. We continue to ask for. But on August 6th, our county, who we've been working with a lot, did allow the antibody test option to avoid quarantining as part of their recommendations. And we were encouraged to adopt that, and we did. And that was an option that I know a lot of our community was using to avoid the quarantine situation when and if their student had become a close contact. However, I think the state talked a little bit to the county. I think they got a little more in depth on their recommendations. And on August 11th, they did remove that as a recommendation to us. So really at that point, we had antibody testing to exempt a student from quarantine was being recommended by anyone, not the CDC, not the state, and not the local Johnson County level. And so we felt like we can't make that recommendation. We're not scientists, we're educators. We need someone else to look at to help us make that decision and to provide us the proper guidance. And so at this time, we just can't allow that as an option to avoid quarantining. We are, and still even to this day, are asking the IDH to review this and provide some additional guidance as to why or why not we could use this. And we continue to watch what's developing on the CDC's website in regards to antibody testing, whether or not we could use that to return students early from quarantining. But again, all that involves that they have to be asymptomatic. And so if the IDH were to allow it, we would reinstate it. But right now, we just don't feel like we have that option.
Thanks, Jason. Just to kind of add to that. Yeah, and just to kind of add to that, I mean, that's been a big thing for us. You know, we're pushing pretty hard, as Jason said. Amy's been contacting the state to get, we would like a final answer. We want a yes or no answer from the state so that we can move forward. But we don't want to reinstate it and then be told in a week or two that we have to take it out. So we're pushing really hard on the state to give us a yes or no answer on being able to use that, because there's nothing worse than what happened on August 6th, giving it to us, and on August 11th, taking it away. So we are as equally frustrated as many of you are over this. And we're just working our tails off, just making sure that when we get guidance that we can stick to it. This isn't, I know many people, you know, are pretty critical of us and when we took it away. We're doing all we can, folks. I just want everyone to know that. We're doing all we can. And if we can allow it, we are trying very hard to take advantage of the options that are given to us. We're not trying to figure out how to make it more difficult. We're trying to figure out how to make it easier for everyone. And so we're equally frustrated, and we're stuck in the middle of what happens. So I just want to really stress that, because I know a lot of folks that are out there, you know, working and dealing with this day to day. Amy and her team, Jason and others are just really kind of getting inundated with some really negative emails. And we're just trying to follow the guidance and the rules we're given. We're not trying to make things difficult. And so just please understand that, and understand that we share in your frustration. As soon as we get guidance that we know we can stick to, we're gonna make that decision and direction and make that change, whatever that is. If it means we get to use the antibody test, fantastic, we will use it. If we can't, at least we'll know exactly why. The whole thing about being recommended is such a gray area, and it makes it very difficult. for us. So we're pushing. We would like to use the antibody test, and we're really pushing on the state. So I just want to really hit that home with folks to know that. Anything else, Amy?
I think at the end of the day, I know there's a lot of different questions regarding the different recommendations, the different things that are out there. Why does Synagro follow some, but maybe appear to not follow others? I think that we are going to quarantine because we have positive cases. Currently that distance is 3 feet. That's what we're going to use. Those are things to keep our students safe. Unfortunately, with as much community spread as we have, with the state's numbers continuing to rise, we have to do what we can to protect being able to have school every day and have students in school every day. And this is one component of that. And I think that can be confusing. My goal all the time is to be consistent in what we are doing and to provide consistent guidance that hopefully won't change, even if people don't like what it is. I don't want it, I try very hard to make it so that we are being consistent in what we are doing, so that there aren't these back and forths and things like that. I know that antibody testing is a frustration. I think that depending on who you talk to in the community, there's some question about reliability of what it tells us. And that's kind of where some of these recommendations have fallen. And so, as soon as I can get better information from the state in regards to what we can do, then we're going to pass that on and be able to figure that out. But right now it's kind of a back and forth with us, with the state, to try to see where things are at.
Yes, and kind of digging into that a little bit more, and Jason talked about this before, but the executive order that the governor put forth, while he says we have local control, when you dig into the order, you'll see that it references laws we must follow on various decisions, and things like quarantining and contact tracing. Those aren't optional. When you read the executive order, and it, as he shared, you can find that it's linked into many of the documents. You'll see that we don't have much of it's the law, and we're being told to follow that law, and we will. So that's the challenge, because some folks will think that we have an option on some items, but when you dig down into the law, we don't. And so that's the challenge also for Jason and his team and Amy and the work they're doing, to make sure that. The other thing is, in that same kind of vein, it is the plan that we have in place here at the local level, at the school board level. We are following that plan. The board has, we may take some major changes back to the board, but the board has allowed us to make changes without necessarily having to take it back for a vote. For example, the antibody test didn't necessarily require a vote from the board. The board allowed that I, along with, in consultation with them and the administration, and can make those changes if we have to. There's a reason the board gave us that ability, and that is because this is an ever-evolving situation. And we can't bring a board together every time we have to tweak the situation based on the guidance we get from the state or from the county. We may need to act immediately. This was one thing, for example, on this antibody test, we received that information early in the week, and we pushed back for an entire week before we communicated it out. In fact, we communicated it out on a Friday, not because we're sneaky, not because of any other reason than we had been pushing back all week, and we have been arguing, and we wanted clear, we wanted to be clear before we took this away. We wanted to keep it, and it was a real struggle. And as of today, like I said, we're still pushing back at the state level to get a final answer so that we can take that, whatever we're going to do, and move forward and not be bouncing back and forth that yes, you can, no, you can't. And so that's the real push here for us on that issue. But I just want to say that, while we may make changes and tweaks to Our current plan, it doesn't always have to go before the board for a vote. Just wanted to make sure that everyone understood that. Talk a little bit about face coverings.
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, face coverings are required on the bus due to the federal mandate that exists for public transportation. We'll continue to honor that, and to the best of our ability, we'll continue to provide masks to students and to not turn them away at the bus stop. You probably did see an article in the Daily Journal. The county did change some guidance on Monday that they strongly recommend that all students and staff wear face coverings. And they tied that to some positivity rates. And so they wanted us to look at the number of positive cases, and if they exceeded 2% in any one building, that we would ask that building and all the individuals inside of it to wear face coverings. And they would do that until it dropped back below 1%. We did receive this recommendation. We're looking at it. We have yet to adopt it or to make a move towards that. We are monitoring our positivity rate, and it is below the 1% level in our buildings. The way to think about that is that if a student's positive today, they would remain a positive in that count for a period of time, and then they would fall off. And so while we might get 4 new cases today, we very well could have dropped 4 cases off at the same time from students who were positive last week. And so we continue to watch that. Ms. Norman tracks that daily for us. We do watch that, and we're still, like I said, at the 1% or low level. And so we're still considering this recommendation, but we've yet to adopt it.
Just kind of gives you an example here of that chart, or of that rule, I should say. So you can see, for example, what would be 1% in each of our buildings or 2% in each of our buildings. So I give everyone just kind of a minute. And again, the slides show, and this presentation will be available online. But so if we were to utilize the recommendations from the Johnson County Health Department, these would be the numbers that we would use to determine whether or not we were at a 1% or a 2% threshold. So I believe the next slide shares our current numbers.
Yep. Perfect.
So
And
I think Jason did a really good job of explaining how we have roll on, roll off. And I don't know if you want to say a little more about this, Jason.
I was just going to add that, and I don't want to steal thunder. The next slide's actually the one I wanted to make sure we highlighted. So yeah,
Okay.
our numbers are still looking very good. We've been watching schools that started a week or 2 ahead of us, and we continue to wait to see what our second and third week of school will look like as well. But again, we feel like this is our community doing a great job of protecting themselves, getting vaccinated, and just operating safely.
Sorry, Jason, is this the slide you want to write here?
Yeah, go to the next slide for us, because this is the one that Ms. Conrad probably wants to talk about this the most, but this really talks about where we store all this information for individuals.
Yeah, so one of the things you may have noticed is we've rolled into a new website. And so some of the things look a little different on the website, but as you can see, this COVID-19 protocols is on every website in the sliders, and we'll roll through and you will see that so that you can click on that, and I'll stop and Stacy, you can provide more information about the website there. So kind of talk about how it all lays out.
Sure. So on that main page, when you pull up our district website or any of our school website, it does have that slider for the COVID-19 protocols, and those rotate through. If you scroll down to the middle of every page, you have site shortcuts on all of them, and those are all the same no matter what page you go to. And so the COVID information is also there. And under the district page, if you click on that district channel, it'll drop down, and there's also a way to get there. So it's multiple different places that you can get to that dashboard.
And also too, something to let us know about, as I shared, we're on a new website design, and some of the links may be dead. They may not go to the right place. If when you discover that by accident, we think we've caught them all, but there are probably literally thousands of links on our website. And if we've missed something, it'd be really helpful if you could email. Stacy gets the email. What is that email, Stacy, that they should? reach out to?
Yeah, there's one at the bottom of the page. It's questions@centergrove.k12.in.us.
So please, if you come across something, and particularly COVID related, that might even be out of date, trying to keep up with it all. And we link a lot of our stuff back to the county and or the state because it changes so much, and we try not to create our own document if the state's going to update their document on a regular basis, or the county. But probably the most interesting thing for you will be our dashboard, our COVID-19 dashboard with our numbers, which you can see here on the left-hand side of your screen.
And just pointing out there, because we did have some questions on what happened to the daily emails from last year. We addressed that in our back to school plan, and towards the end of the year, when our numbers, our quarantines and our cases were lower, those became a little bit of a burden and annoyance. We chose this year to publish that daily on the website. So individuals who are and are used to receiving that email, just save this page and bookmark it and take a look. Ms. Norman and Ms. Conrad update the cases daily. We do update the absences. That's a weekly total that we put out there. Those fluctuate, and it's something we can't get done just daily. And it's something that sometimes it's a very small number. We don't want to show that increase at that time, but we want to make sure we're protecting students as much as we can. And with this information, these are the items we submit to the state database as well, as part of that, again, requirement to submit our cases and our close contacts. And so we will populate this by the end of the day. Sometimes those are late evenings for our folks, but they do get it done every day and get that updated.
Can I talk a minute about just reporting cases to us?
Yes.
You can report if you have a positive case with one of your students. You can report that to the schools directly, to the school clinics. You can report it to me directly. We've also placed there's a form online that you can click to report it through the website, so that way we can have that information. I also receive a daily report every morning from the Johnson County Health Department that lists the positive cases for our area. So we then cross-reference that with the student database to determine if we have students who have tested positive. From my standpoint, it's a lot easier if you've contacted us, just because we can then provide you with the direct information for getting your student back to school and those dates, and just help you through this process, because I know that at times it can be very, very confusing. So I just wanted to make sure that was kind of pointed out. I think also there's been some question, regarding antibody testing. There's been a lot of talk about that, and as well as just the testing for, like, if you test positive for COVID. I guess what I'd like to address there is that when you test positive for the active infection, that's utilizing what's called an antigen, which is typically a rapid test or a PCR. And a PCR is the gold standard test. It's the one that usually takes a day or two to get back the results. Although there's been some improvements, and those are even coming back sometimes within an hour. The antibody testing is a completely separate entity. It does not detect an active infection. And so therefore it does not get, you can't go get an antibody test to determine if you actively have COVID. It's just basically saying that, you've probably been exposed to it at some point, but it's not telling you that you have active infection. So therefore it's not used for this type of reporting process or in the state's reporting of positivity cases and positivity rates.
Thank you, Amy. I appreciate that. A lot of this information and so forth, as I shared, is through that governor's executive order. If you want to see that verbiage, go to the executive order. I think we have some links to it, or we don't have any, Stacy. Maybe we can put one on we'll probably put one on our COVID website so that you can get to that, knowing that, the governor could issue another executive order any day, but at least the one we're working off of today, we'll go ahead and link that in there so that you can get in and read through that verbiage. But one of the things I'll say about that, along with all of this data and some of the biggest struggles we have, we're working really super hard to meet the expectations of our community members. And we have 9,140 students in our school today. And that means we have that many parents and community members out there. That also means we have that many opinions. We have folks who feel one way or another, whether it's masks, whether it's quarantining, whether it's antibody tests, and we're hearing from all of you. And we hear from one part of the gambit all the way to the other. And we're working really hard to assimilate all of that information. And we get your emails, and I literally read all of them. And there are hundreds of them. And I read them, I share them with the board, I share them with the team. I try to respond, and I apologize if sometimes my responses are shorter. I apologize if sometimes my responses are pretty much the same, because quite honestly, most of the emails are the same one way or another, whether it is I want everyone in masks or I don't want anybody to wear masks. So obviously, I do what I can. I appreciate the data that people send us. I appreciate the information, and I get information, both sides, share that with everyone involved, including the board. And they also then are informed. So when people ask us, how do you get heard as a community member? You're getting heard. Your emails, we hear you, and we're sharing that. So I kind of go on to the next slide, which is about board meetings. And so if you could bear with me, it might make sense to you to understand that in a public board meeting, the most the board's going to allow is 15 minutes for any kind of community input on the agenda items. However, they're going to hear the hundreds of emails that are sent. They're going to have the opportunity to read all of those emails, and they do. And they're going to have the opportunity to really think through those. In a public board meeting, I might at best get through 5 or 6 people. And so that's one of the reasons when people ask, well, I need to address the board and want to go on record. Well, a couple of things, just like this meeting that we're having today, everything that's shared, everything that is recorded, the questions that are put forth and we answer, those are all documented. And in a public school environment, everything we produce, everything we store is for public consumption. So this, as I shared, this video will be posted, and our responses to questions will all be there, as well as, when you're asking those questions, obviously we're answering them. And so that input is there. We hear from people all the time. As to whether they would prefer masks or not, the antibody tests. So please understand that, the team is working really hard. No one is trying to make a decision one way or another to make anyone's life difficult. We're just, we're working within the parameters we're given. And like I shared, we have 9,140 students, 9,140 opinions, and double that for parents and community members as well. And the board's working really hard to meet those expectations. And when we do that, we obviously don't meet everyone's expectation. And so as they continue to work towards that, that's part of it. But I wanted to talk about what a board meeting is. A lot of folks need to understand that a school board meeting is about the board conducting its business in public. It's not a public meeting. So they're not having a meeting for the public to participate in. They're having a meeting for the public to observe their business. They do have a little bit of opportunity for some public input based on agenda items. That's per code, and that's also per the board policy that you have here. Probably in the last 10 years, the board has allowed maybe 2 to 3 groups to participate in a board meeting. Prior to that, the group has requested to come on and present to the board. We've seen that a few times. A lot of times it's about the needs of the facilities. This is all prior to COVID, but a lot about the needs of facilities and what we need to do there, or maybe as in regards to redistricting or something like that. And so while the board would sometimes allow that, there's a process that they would go through to see if hearing directly from a group over a particular item that they are working on would be beneficial, then they would do that. So when we talk about COVID, for example, the real big challenge here is knowing what are the experts, right? And who to hear from the experts. What are we going to hear if we open the public meeting for 15 minutes and we give the floor to half the group, pro mask or pro antibody tests and or against masks and against antibody tests. And so bringing those two things together and having people present that does not help the board inform its decision anymore. All they're going to hear is 2 points of view, and that's the problem. What they need is to hear from experts in the field, which at this particular moment in time would be the county health department, would be the Indiana State and the CDC, and then make those decisions. When we talk about things such as masks, we get information on both sides of the coin. Whether or not you believe that information, I don't know. It's a challenge, and I get that. We get a lot of parents who will argue one side or the other. We've seen around the country people present to school boards, and then later on, everything they said to the school board gets torn apart in public. That's the challenge that our school board has, in that what is the right data? What is the right information? And obviously the rest of the country is struggling with that too. And so the best approach for us and what we believe is that you continue to provide us information. I have no problem receiving the emails. It's my job. I have no problem reading through them all. That's what I do. And I share every one of them, as many of you know, because I respond to you and I copy everyone involved in the decision process. And we take it very seriously, and we care about our kids, and we care about our district, and we're continuing to really work through all of this. So I just want to say, when it comes to the school board, they are transparent. We post everything on the web. They talk about everything. They took a vote in public on the last plan. That last plan is what's in place today. If we would make a major change to that plan, they would vote on it. They did give us the ability to make some tweaks. For example, the antibody test. And so we did take that off per the understanding we had with the county health department. Like we said earlier, if we have a definitive answer from the state, one way or the other, then we'll make that change. And believe me, we want to make that change if we can. So as you can see, this is the board policy. This is what the board has adopted and it had in place for years, for many, many years, way before me. And this is how they conduct their business when it comes to that piece. So I just wanted to put that out there. I don't know, Stacy, before we get off of COVID, do we have some questions we didn't respond to in our conversation? I'm sorry. Oh, I see you shaking your head no. Okay. All right. All right. And so we're going to shift gears here a little bit, and we're going to talk about social emotional learning. And Amy, I know you might be, if you have to go, I understand, but if you can stay on, we may get questions towards the end. So
yeah, I can stay for questions towards the end. That's fine.
Okay. Oh, fantastic. Okay. All right. So let's talk about social emotional learning. And I think I'm going to start by turning this over to, Christy or Nora first?
Yep.
Okay, Christy. Great. Yeah.
All right. Just wanted to give some updates since we have shared last. Wanted to give you the links to where you can find a lot of the information that we shared we would be posting, especially with the new website. So the first 9-week lessons have been posted on our district website. You can see all 4 lessons for each grade there. There is also a feedback form where if you have questions, concerns, suggestions, please feel free to fill that out and I will respond quickly. My goal is 24 hours, but sometimes it may take a little bit longer than that. Also wanted to connect about the Panorama survey. Last Friday, you should have received an email there via Parent Square. And then either Monday or early this week, a hard copy also should have been sent home with your child. Those forms, although they're from the overarching article is from me, they actually need to be returned to your school office. So the school office will be tracking that. The school counselors and school social workers will be the ones that will collect those forms to ensure that your child does not participate. We will be sending that opt-out form again in the spring because per board policy, we need to notify parents every time we offer that. But if you opt out for the fall, then you can say that that's for the full year or the semester. So also wanted to make sure that you know that within that letter, there are live links that show you the exact questions that are asked of your students. And so those are by grade level. So you'll see a K2 link, a 3-5 link, and then a 6-12 link. And those are the exact questions that your students will see this fall and spring. Also, after we held the parent SEL information session, we took additional questions and those were all posted on Friday. At the link below, you'll see that you can get on and see the answers to those questions. I will say that took us some time, so I appreciate you all being patient with that. There are a few questions we are still answering and we'll get those posted as soon as we have the final answer, but you can find all of those questions posted there and we will continue to update those sites as those are live working documents to answer the questions that you all may have as parents. So appreciate your partnership in this and please reach out to me if you have any questions and I will turn it over to Dr. Hoover.
Thank you, Christy. I appreciate all that work you have and I have put into that along with Stacy getting those things on our website. Again, if you have additional questions, please just make sure you're reaching out to us. We are happy to help or use the feedback form within the SEL lessons page so that we can help in any way we can.
Okay, let's talk a little bit. Do we have any questions on SEL particularly? No? Okay.
Nope.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the media center and libraries.
Sure.
Yeah.
I know there have been a lot of questions coming up, or we've had a few people reach out to us about concerns with library books. And we wanted to be responsive to helping support families that had those questions. And so I wanted to make sure families knew that there are things that are available like in Destiny for all kids that it might show that you can have books, but only any book that's labeled young adult is actually available 6 through 12, both physically and in our digital library. And so we fixed that. It looked like younger kids could check out books that were not appropriate for them, even though they couldn't. So we've made that change. The other thing we want to make sure that our families understand is that we know some families may want to have a little more or be able to restrict some books that they have their child reading. So there is a hold process that if you go to school websites, this process is in there and you fill out a form for your child's school. And the family will put books on hold for our students. So instead of a student going in there and having access to every book in the library, families can select along with their child. So mom or dad can sit next to the child and pick out books each week that they would like their child to pick up or bring home from the library and be able to read. And so there will be a lot of communication then. The media special or the media person, librarian in each building will reach out to verify, yes, we got that hold request, and we will hold all the books that you and your child select. they'll let the classroom teacher know and the principal will know. So we'll work to help families in that area.
Thank you, Nora. I appreciate your work on this. And then also too, you know, I think if folks aren't aware, a lot of this has been developing over the last couple of weeks. And we appreciate parents' feedback and wanting us and asking us questions about books and what's in the library. And I just really appreciate that parents are that interested and involved, and making sure that they're reading with their children, looking at what their children are reading, and questioning that. This is awesome, and I think it's why we have such a great community and you know, great kids, because our parents are so involved and connected. So I do really appreciate that. And just continuing to work as you see that. If you have suggestions when you're going through this process, particularly on the media center and the library, make sure you reach out to Nora and her team. They'll definitely you know, take your calls and your emails and make adjustments as if they're appropriate to our process. So we appreciate working together with everyone. And also too, as Christy pointed out on the SEL lessons, there are features on our website to provide feedback. We would really appreciate feedback on that, on the SEL lessons. This is our first year doing a lot of this, so we'll only be better if we hear from you and getting some feedback as to what we're doing. And we may not always agree with some of, you know, the suggestions, or they may not be, you know, the right thing for the process, but we definitely want to hear it, and we want to know what your ideas and thoughts are. So please use those links. And I can tell you that we've made changes based on your feedback. This parent restriction piece and the process is a direct result of parent feedback. And so, as you can see, we do make those adjustments based on what we hear from you. So I know we're kind of at the end of talking about those 3 hot topics. And if there's other things, we can definitely address those. I do, you know, want to say that as going back to COVID, for example, some of the work there that's being done, a lot of people are like, so what are those trigger points when you're going to tell us all that we, you know, have to wear masks, or what are those trigger points in other decisions? But mostly probably the mask is the big thing on everyone's mind. And as you saw, Jason kind of pointed out what the county has recommended as a possible process, a 1% and 2% threshold for that. We are examining that. That may be something we use. That's more of an in-depth conversation that we're going to have as a team and with the board. And that's something that we would probably bring back to the board for a vote. That would be some opportunity where you would probably have a clear opportunity maybe to weigh in. You would also see the process take place as to what change might happen with the plan if we utilize some particular data. You know, there's a lot of questions about all the extenuating data that is out there, whether it's hospitalizations, the use of respirators and so forth and things like that. We look at all of that data. We're provided all that data, and we look at it and really examine that data as well. We take all of that into consideration. We share that with the board. They take all that into consideration. So, Stacey, was there any follow-up questions on COVID that we didn't really address or need to dig a little deeper in?
I mean, there are several in there, but I think we've touched on the ones and answered the ones that we can.
Okay. Amy, is there any last thoughts that you had since we talked about COVID a few seconds ago?
Yeah, I know that. I mean, I know there's questions about distance and things like that. You know, the goal is to get students 3 feet apart in school buildings that weren't meant for social distancing. You know, we do the best that we can. That's why we see that there's scenarios where we see potting and things of that sort. So you have groups of, 3, 4, 5 kids that are kind of sitting all together, probably closer, and then they're than 3 to 4 feet away from another pod of students, in an effort to try to minimize down what quarantine would look like, which was where we were kind of at, at the beginning of last year. Things, believe it or not, things actually, we have worked through the process from where we were when we came back to school last year. Last year when we came back to school, it was distancing of 6 feet, regardless of anything, which, resulted in a lot of students being quarantined who probably didn't need to be. And that was why, when second semester came around, the state made some adjustments in recommendations and determinations about what quarantine looks like. And so that's why we're now at that 3 feet. And then the county has also given us 3 feet without masks. And so that's, where we've landed, and that's where we're able to, kind of minimize down those quarantines so that if your student is being quarantined, there is reason to be watching them for symptoms. My hope is that parents are watching their students for symptoms every day. To be honest, there is a lot of positivity in the community. And I know that there are, we all move around this community outside of school and outside of these specific, guidances and rules that we're following. And so I think it's just important to be mindful that, what's going on, the school is just kind of a reflection of what goes on in your community. As the positivity rate has, increased, that's caused us to see some increase in quarantine that we experience in the schools. I think we've done an excellent job of trying to offer these different options of the day 8 and the day 11 and the day 15. I will just be blunt and honest. It was a whole lot easier on me and my team when we just did day 15. But I understand that we want to get students back. And so that's what we're trying to accomplish here. So the biggest thing I can request is please check monitor your students for symptoms every single day, regardless of whether there's quarantine, regardless of whether they've had close contact. If your child is sick, please keep them home. They're not going to be able to learn at school, and give them that opportunity to kind of see where this is going and what it is. But please don't send them to us sick. We're seeing, a lot of visits into our clinics, which is understandable. However, we really just want to try to keep this as, parents making the decisions for their families, what they feel they need to do. So if your child is sick, please keep them home. Please check in with them and see how they're doing with stuff, so that we can kind of avoid, because honestly, if they're coming into school and they have fevers and they have multiple symptoms, we're going to send them out for 10 days unless you get a negative test stating they can come back. So, be mindful of that. We are definitely, the nurses are working diligently to try to discern, who is sick and who is not. We understand that we have a lot of belly aches caused by a lot of different reasons. So, we are working through those processes too. So, but just be mindful that if the nursing staff is like, hey, we really think they need to be out for 10 days and you need to consider getting tested, they're exhibiting some symptoms that we're concerned about. So just be mindful of that, I guess.
Thank you, Amy. Yeah, I appreciate that. One of the questions is from Kara Cecil. She had asked if I'm concerned that the revised policies may encourage families to avoid COVID testing, and that all policies can have unintended consequences. I am concerned. I'm concerned about everything. I'm concerned about wearing masks. I'm concerned about not wearing masks. I'm concerned about an antibody test. I'm, using it, not using it. I am not a medical professional. I am leaning heavily on medical professionals who argue with each other over all of this. And so we are stuck in the middle trying to navigate through a muddy pond. And it's stressful for every single one of us involved. So yeah, to answer the question, I am extremely concerned about all of it. And as we continue to adapt and change to the ever evolving recommendations and suggestions from our medical professionals, You know, we are, again, like I said, trying to meet the expectations of our overall community. So I appreciate the question and the opportunity to just kind of share out that, yeah, it's a heavy burden. It's a huge concern for all of us. And please know, and we appreciate the grace that you're giving us as we continue to try and find the best answers for all of these situations. And I know, Amy, I just want to say how much we appreciate you, the hard work you're doing, your nurses, your team, and you know, you're the bearer of bad news, and unfortunately, a lot of times you are not treated very nicely. And you know, I just hope people will continue to respect you and give you the grace as you're just trying to do your job and take care of folks and their health. And so thank you for that. I just want to make sure.
I appreciate that. You know, I think that we're all just, this is hard on a lot of levels for everyone. You know, it is very rarely that we experience something in the world that affects our entire community and our entire state and our entire nation, you know. And so I think that it is a difficult time for all. And I do realize that when people are upset, you know, it's directed at the circumstances. My hope is it's not directed at me or my staff personally. And so we do try to keep that in mind. But, you know, grace is always appreciated. And I thank you. So.
Thank you, Amy. Anyone else? Any other questions? Any other questions, Stacy?
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of them. We're trying to answer them
Okay, you're answering them
in the chat.
In the chat.
But,
okay.
Others, I think, have been emailed to you to answer as well.
Okay.
So if,
I see that several have asked about.
If the questions are not answered today, do you want them to email them to you?
Sure. Yeah, email them, and then we will probably direct them to the Q&A. Just because it, you know, as I shared at the beginning, there's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of duplicate questions, and if I can direct them to the Q&A where they'll get their answer faster than me trying to get through hundreds of emails and provide a direct answer to. I did see that several have asked if we would mandate masks if we hit the 2%. That is something, again, I think we are asking and having a conversation with our team and the board as to, is that a metric we want to use? So we haven't made that determination yet. If we do, that'll be communicated out. Would that be correct, Jason? We haven't made that, right?
That's correct. Yep.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
So I think that's one. Just looking through to see if there are any other like large same question, same type of question that we could answer. Okay, I don't think so. We'll continue to provide you with answers to the questions. They're answering them online, I believe, right now. They'll take this transcription of what we've done in the Q&A box, and we'll be posting it online under our Q&A section as well. So if there's nothing else, Stacy, I'll let everybody get on to work. And I appreciate everyone's participation.